This is our annual insurance fraud and auto theft prevention seminar. We have a government, through an assessment on insurance companies, and industry cooperative venture that's been in place since now Senator Blade Morris created it in the late 90s and has supported it actively. The legislation created a three-part partnership of the Attorney General's office, state police, and the insurance fraud section of our Louisiana Department of Insurance. It's been very successful. Our reduction over the past 5 years in auto theft in Louisiana outpaces the national reduction. Both are good news. Nationally, a 34% reduction. In our state, a 48% reduction. And our state's ranking has improved from 26th to 30th in auto theft. That's one small part of insurance fraud. And we'll spend today leading off with U.S. Attorney Walter Green from here in the Middle District and wrapping up with District Attorney Hilla Moore later this afternoon, and an impressive array of panelists in between talking about the efforts put forth by us and others to reduce and try to prevent insurance fraud and auto theft.
How have you been able to reduce the number of autos that have been stolen in Louisiana?
Well, I think our outreach, our public initiatives that have informed, in particular young people, that this is a gateway crime and will haunt them for the rest of their lives if they go down that path. In addition to that, technology has improved the ability of law enforcement to read license plates as they drive down the street and snap pictures and do instant verification through state police data system that a vehicle is stolen. That alone, the license plate reader program, has resulted in hundreds of apprehensions of auto thieves and the recovery of many. I think the number was 84 over the past 5 years, stolen vehicles that were parked on the side of the street after having been stolen by a thief. So that's one piece of technology. We have also done, in cooperation with industry, bait car programs where we have been able to put vehicles in high-risk areas and equip them with the automatic locking mechanism that has apprehended a number of thieves in the act. The word goes out when things like that are being utilized, and it becomes a deterrent to such activity. Our partnership with the Attorney General and the state police, our cooperation with the DA's office here in town and the U.S. Attorney's office is what makes our efforts, I think, probably as noteworthy, as successful as any insurance fraud and auto theft prevention activity in the United States. I do believe that our effort and our partnership started actually by our current Senate Insurance Committee Chair, Blade Morris, back when he and I were serving in the House of Representatives together, and both were on the House Insurance Committee, and he created the assessment on the industry and the effort to create a partnership with the industry that has led us to being here today, and the success that we'll talk about throughout this meeting today that has resulted over the past several years. But I also want to take a moment to recognize a fellow who, until last year, led our effort at the department in this area, and that's Paul Boudreau. Paul has retired from our department, but gave us great service during his years in the executive director position for the LATIFPA effort. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Baton Rouge today and to our conference. We're excited about another opportunity to present to you an excellent lineup of speakers and panelists who will share with you the latest information as it relates to insurance fraud. The conference is sponsored by the Louisiana Department of Insurance, along with the Louisiana Automobile Theft and Insurance Fraud Prevention Authority. We call it LATIFPA. The title is a little too long. And it includes the industry, who through their assessment, but also through their donations of monies as well as vehicles and sophisticated equipment have been a big part of our success over the past several years. As you are aware, insurance fraud is a crime that results in significant cost, both personal and financial. You can find victims and perpetrators of insurance fraud in every state in our country, and in fact, in every community in our country, and they come from all walks of life. According to the Coalition Against Insurance Fraud, it costs Americans at least $80 billion a year across all lines of insurance. But we also know that much fraud goes unreported. The Department of Insurance encourages the public to report cases of suspected insurance fraud. This can be done online, where reporting can be done confidentially and anonymously from a link on our website. The Division of Insurance Fraud at the Louisiana Department of Insurance received about 3,800 such complaints of suspected fraud during the past fiscal year. That represented a 3% increase in complaints over the previous fiscal year. Of the complaints received, about half were referred to law enforcement, and that resulted in nearly 200 arrests. Beyond the issue of insurance fraud, LATIFPA is also active in auto theft prevention. We've seen some encouraging trends on the auto theft side. According to the most recent uniform crime reporting data from the FBI, the number of auto thefts statewide has been declining. In fact, for the past 5 years, from 2007 through the most recent data in 2012, the number of auto thefts in Louisiana declined by 48%. That compares with a national decline over the same period of 34%. That decline in the number of reported auto thefts improved Louisiana's national ranking from where we were 26th in America in 2011 to 30th in 2012. The Louisiana Automobile Theft and Insurance Fraud Prevention Authority has two major initiatives to help achieve the goal of reducing auto thefts in our state. The Vehicle Investigation Prevention Enforcement Response, or VIPER program, is a bait car program started in 2006 in partnership with the National Insurance Crime Bureau. Vehicles donated by the insurance industry are equipped with technology funded by LATIFPA and given to local law enforcement agencies. The bait cars are used to target vehicle burglaries in high crime areas. Criminals are increasingly choosing to steal property from a vehicle instead of the vehicle itself. Often, teams of thieves will canvass a neighborhood, checking door handles to determine which vehicles are unlocked. This is why we encourage everyone to, quote, lock it up. And you may have seen billboards around the state with that message. In fact, as a result of that message, I no longer leave my folders and files in my vehicle in the driveway overnight as well. LATIFPA and NICB currently have a VIPER program in East Baton Rouge, Calcasieu, Orleans, and Ouachita parishes. The License Plate Recognition, or LPR program, utilizes fixed cameras to snap vehicles of license plates. The photos are immediately run through the state police database for stolen vehicles. Almost instantaneously, an officer is alerted to the presence of a stolen vehicle. Last year, the LPR program accounted for 80 arrests and helped recover 87 stolen vehicles. LATIFPA LPR systems are currently in use in Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Lake Charles, and Kenner. Lastly, I'd like to talk about disaster fraud and introduce the man in charge of that effort here in Baton Rouge. Many times when I'm asked to speak to a group, we get off on the subject of hurricanes and homeowners insurance, and we have all been pleased with the quiet season we've had this year. In fact, this has been the quietest hurricane season in more than 30 years. Just yesterday, though, I was watching the most recent Atlantic hurricane as it did significant damage to my friends in the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico and headed toward Bermuda with winds projected to reach 140 miles per hour. So we can be very thankful for the blessing we've had in the form of another quiet season as we had the year before as well. And that is particularly good news in the area of disaster fraud. Disaster fraud is one area we're much too familiar with, having experienced more than our share of disasters from hurricanes over the years, as well as spring flooding and occasional hailstorms. With such disasters come the perpetrators of fraud, in particular contractor fraud. Disaster fraud is the central topic of our keynote speaker, our United States Attorney for the Middle District, Mr. Walter Green.
Of course, we're here to speak about the National Center for Disaster Fraud, and many people don't even realize it's here. And to be quite honest, it's a gem to have it in Baton Rouge. Usually when you have a National Center for Disaster Fraud or something of this sort, it's in Washington, D.C., or it's in L.A., or it's in New York City. But here, located in Johnson Hall aboard LSU, this is where all the fraud complaints from the major agencies come in from across the nation. We receive hundreds of calls a week, and what I want to do is just give you an idea of what the NCDF is about, the type of volume of cases we do, and hopefully I'm here to drum up some business. After we talk about the NCDF for a little while, I'm going to try to talk about the role of the U.S. Attorney's Office, because a lot of people don't know exactly what we do. Bill Root knows, Rudy Babin knows who's here, but I get to go and I get to see people across the district here, where we have about 1 million citizens in my district. And the first question I always get is, how do you like working for Buddy Caldwell? And I like Buddy, but I don't work for Buddy. I work for Eric Holder, the Attorney General of the United States. So this is what it is. Of course, everyone remembers Hurricane Katrina and the large devastation we had. I certainly don't need to tell anybody that about here. But Attorney General Gonzales came down to New Orleans very shortly after the hurricane, toured the detention center, came back up to Baton Rouge, and what happened was many of the federal agencies from DHS, HHS, FBI, of course, got displaced, as many of the citizens did in New Orleans. And what many of them did, they wound up in Baton Rouge, and LSU gave us spaces aboard Johnson Hall. And what this led to is very shortly after the money was coming out, as everyone remembers, there was a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse. There were fraudulent complaints, there was waste of benefits. And what the idea was at the time was to take this money from FEMA and to push it out. There wasn't a lot of fact-checking done. It was just, hey, you applied, you're basically going to get the money. And unfortunately, some people took advantage of our system. And what Attorney General Gonzales realized is we need to get our hands around this. There were so many calls coming in. I mean, you had people in Chicago and Oregon claiming Katrina fraud. And so we knew that there weren't any bad weather in Portland, so we had to get our hands around it. What happened was that everyone came together, all the agencies basically across the federal government, all the alphabet soup, came together and they gave us resources and people and computer systems to help do an intake for all the Katrina fraud that came about. That's how it was born. We have a website that you can find very easily on Google, and at every major disaster that occurs across the United States, we call them fly teams. We send people out to educate not only the agencies, the state agencies and the federal agencies, but even the U.S. Attorney's offices. Because generally, U.S. Attorney's offices are not prepared for a major disaster. New Jersey was not ready for Sandy Hook. So as a result, we sent teams up there to tell them about what they should be able to look for, data mining they can do, and just various samples of people who do reoccurring fraud, which can help us prosecute them. These are the people who help us fund right now: HHS, FHFA, and Homeland Security. These are the people who majorly fund the operation, along as well as crim fraud of the Department of Justice. Additionally, not only do we do just disaster, we do hotline complaints for IG's offices. And you can see that everyone we have here, not only the NCDF, but DHS, FFHA, H&HS, and we have other people who want to come into us. And the reason they want to come to LSU is because, very simply, We do the job very well, and we are so cheap, it's unbelievable. So when you think about, do you want to pay a call center in McLean, Virginia to take your calls in, or do you want to join us here at LSU where we pay students about $11 an hour and no benefits, and we actually do work study with them? They come in and take all our complaints for us. LSU basically gives us the space and we pay for the renovations. Therefore, we only charge our federal agencies exactly what it costs us. We are the cheapest game in town, and these kids that come and work for us, they do a great job. And I will tell you, if you have any people that you think that would be good at this, or some serious students at LSU that would like to do the work study, please tell them to go down to Johnson Hall and see Kathy Wiley, because we're always looking for some great students. And I will tell you, we only ask them to stay for a year because it takes us several months to train them up, because they're going to be answering calls from any of these agencies and enter in pertinent information, and we do a background check. And they're also eligible for raises every year. We give them raises simply just on making good grades. So it's great for us, it's great for the federal government, we save a lot of money, and it's great for the kids. The major disasters, you can see we've actually had a pretty good year so far. If you look in that far left column, we've only had in the mid-30s. Now this is going to be on a calendar year, so it may creep up a little bit. But as you can see, the ones on the left are the major disasters. And you know, when we have 2011, 2010 with hurricanes and storms, that was a tough year for us. Now we're talking how much funds are we talking about that goes out? Katrina, Rita, and Wilma, tens of billions. And as we know, the BP fraud is ongoing right now. It's kind of slowed down. That they've released a $12.5 billion. That number is current as of August 31st of this year. But I don't know if you've been following it, but based on the cases that have been coming up to the Supreme Court and Louisiana and the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, BP is going to have to release more money now. They tried to appeal the process and the agreement that they actually agreed to, but now that is over with, and they're going to be releasing even more money. So we're looking at about $8 billion that could be spent back out. We have seen a lot of fraud in that, to be quite honest with you. I say a lot. There are the vast majority of people have legitimate claims. This is not a Katrina redo. These people who have the documentation, who lost wages, who lost earnings, but then you're always going to have the fraudsters. You're going to have the people, we've convicted people in Chicago who said he lost his shrimp boat. He didn't lose a shrimp boat in Chicago. So we got him. But it just goes to show you, whenever you're releasing billions of dollars out, there's going to be fraud. And of course, y'all know that better than anybody else. FEMA Public Assistance, they have a very large budget. And across those tables, they're going to be able to provide money for all those. As you can see, there's a lot of fires. I had no idea when I took over the NCDF how many fires there are that are declared emergencies. Of course, many of them are out west, but FEMA handles those exclusively. This is our activity, which you can see during the weeks. We range anywhere from 150 to say 200 calls a week into the NCDF. We have about 18 students on staff. We go 24 hours a day. The night shift is about 6 people, and we have Hispanic speakers during the day and during the night as well, so we don't want to miss anything. You can see the complaints, over 60,000 that we received at the NCDF. And you'll see the numbers on the right-hand pie chart. NFA, no further action. Those are basically complaints that they didn't give us enough information to work on, because we get a lot of them from private citizens who basically say, I know Joe from Minneapolis, and that's about all he knows, who submitted a claim. He doesn't give us enough, and so we can't forward that to an agency. But all the rest of them, the 46,000, that is a case that we believe has come into the NCDF, and we have federal criminal investigators, 1811s as we call them, and they go through every case. So a call comes in, the student is talking to the person or receives the email, puts it into a rapid application database. It's then referred back to all the agencies that are down on the second floor, and mostly right now that's Secret Service and DHS, OIG. They will then look at each one of these cases, and they'll refer it out. So when a case comes in from New York, it'll come into Baton Rouge to the National Call Center, and then we'll forward it out to the New York field office, depending on who that is. And I should say, postal inspectors are also there full-time with us as well, who do a really good job. So once these cases are referred out, it's up to the agency to say this is something we're interested in the field. If they do, the 1811s will then take all the documentation and start piecing it together. They'll get they'll deconflict across the agencies wide with the agencies we have. They'll put a packet together, they'll send it to the field, and when that field agent needs assistance or help, they know who to call. So they'll call back to the NCDF and say, look, I need this document, I don't have his tax returns, can you help me? That agent will go in and try to find them and help them. The agencies on staff as well will help them and tell them about how to get ready for trial. They've all done a lot of trials. We have a case in Mississippi that's pending, which is going to be in the tens of millions of dollars on BP fraud that should be indicted by the end of the year. And they're helping facilitate those cases on a day-to-day basis. So they do a great job. You can see the agencies who get all the referrals, the high DHS at 24,000, and all the way down to the Louisiana AG's office as well. We have a lot of partners. They're very good and very close to us. We maintain contact with everybody there. I should get one of y'all to talk about fraud schemes. Y'all know them probably better than I do, but what do? They put in a claim for lost rent. They never lived there. They put in for a lost boat that they never had, or they may say I lost sales on my shrimp boat or in my hotel that they never owned or were never there. It's a typical fraud. The public corruption, sometimes we get people who are contractors for FEMA that we can go back and charge who are taking bribes or payouts, as well as city officials who overstate their loss, mainly to FEMA, and the FBI gets involved in those as well. Most of these cases are not giant cases money-wise. They will range anywhere from a few thousand to tens of thousands. And to be frank, many U.S. attorneys' offices around the country will not take a case with a loss of $10,000. So what we do is we interface with the state attorney general's office. I was just dealing with the state attorney general in New Jersey yesterday. The DA in Monmouth County is taking the lead on many of these cases, and he's prosecuting every one that the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Jersey can't take because of the volume. So far, Monmouth and Sandy has 300 cases they have open and they're actively prosecuting. That they've been referred many more, and many of those have come through the NCDF. As far as Hurricane Sandy, I think we've learned a great lesson from Hurricane Katrina and Wilma and Rita. The federal government is not pouring the money into Sandy. There's been an article in New York Times a couple of weeks ago being critical of the federal government for not pushing the money out as quickly, and Governor Cuomo in New York for not pushing out the money as quickly, as well as the mayor's office in New York City, but it's because no one wants a repeat of Katrina. Unfortunately, there are some people who probably going to get hurt because they're not getting the money out fast enough, but the fraud numbers are much lower this time. These are the numbers of complaints so far. Of course, you can see in the middle column at the very top, Hurricane Katrina, that's the big number, in excess of 30,000 total complaints that we've received at the NCDF just on that. And then the second highest is, it says on the first column, Deepwater Horizon oil spill, in excess of 13,000. Again, that number is going to roll continuously for the next couple of years. Hurricane Katrina, we still get complaints for that. We're still taking cases in. Many of them we can't go after criminally because, of course, prescription issues, but we can go after them civilly. So we can go back and sue them civilly and retake their money. And fortunately for us, if they've gotten federal money, a U.S. Attorney's Office can go back and not only get, say if they got $10,000 from the fund, we don't only get the $10,000, but we can also get treble damages. So we can get $30,000 back for someone who takes any money from a federal program. And we've exercised that during Hurricane Katrina. In the Middle District, we did double damages, and we also convicted everyone that came aboard on us. We had zero tolerance, whether it was $2,000 or $25,000. We took every case in the Middle District, and I will tell you, I think in direct relation to that, our office has almost no BP Horizon fraud cases, which is amazing. We have less cases than anyone on the Gulf Coast by far, and during Katrina, we were number 2. And I think the reason is that everyone that came across our desk got prosecuted. And I'll give credit to former U.S. Attorney David Dugas, who made that a priority. We took every case, even though the dollars were low. I think the deterrent effect of prosecuting every case in such a disaster has really paid off for Baton Rouge and the surrounding parishes. And again, this is our complaint process. We can take them in through our own NCDF hotline, fax, mail, email, or the 1-800-CALL-FBI, kind of catchy. And then we take them, put them into the database, as I said, and they're deconflicted across agency-wide to make sure someone else isn't working them. If someone else is working them, it would be a waste of time. But we will take that information, say it's being worked by postal inspectors in Minneapolis, we'll take that extra complaint and send it up. The other important thing about having a national center is that we see groups of people who will commit fraud, which is very important federally, because it really gets, I can talk to my other U.S. attorneys and say, look, this isn't a $10,000 fraud. This is one person recruiting 100 people to do $10,000. And that really gets the money up, and then they get very interested in those type of cases. We see recruiters every day. We see the same Social Security numbers. We see the same addresses and P.O. boxes, and we know if we get 50 people in the same P.O. box, that's a very good indicator of fraud. And we're going to take those type of cases. Those are pretty good for us. Not many of these cases go to trial. I mean, I think when the agencies roll out, and many times we get a confession pretty much off the bat, they're pretty willing to talk about it. Most of these people aren't repeat offenders, but some of them are recidivists, the ones that run the big rings. We've also been able to identify what we call as storm chasers. They basically will apply for disaster fraud every time that there's a fraud related where they can get money. Anytime FEMA declares a national fraud, we've been able to take through Social Security numbers and addresses people who do it in different places over and over again. We've been able to prosecute some of those people as well. These are the type of the posters we do when we go out on the fly teams, when we go out and educate people, try to get the word out. We're doing probably 6 or 7 trips a year, and then we do online training across the nation as needed for whoever asks for the assistance. And this is the contact info. Again, if you have someone or any information you'd like to pass to us, or you know someone who would like to pass it to us, please tell them it can be 100% anonymous. You don't have to give us your name. All we're asking for is information. If you wish to be contacted, we would love to contact you, because that will give the officer across the United States someone to talk to, but it's not necessary. Again, what we are is a clearinghouse for the nation to send it out in any direction that we need to. But again, feel free. Kathy Wiley, right there, if you're ever interested or sending someone down, a student to work with us, we'd love to have them. Our message here today is from the U.S. Attorney's Office. What we want to do is bring to all these fraud investigators and talk about the National Center for Disaster Fraud. The National Center for Disaster Fraud has been here since Hurricane Katrina. It was stood up several years ago, and what we do is we're a national center located aboard LSU. We take in all of the disaster and non-disaster fraud complaints from around the nation. We then take those complaints in, address them to the appropriate agency, and then they send them back out to the field. So it's actually a national organization located right here in Baton Rouge.
How serious is the problem of disaster fraud?
Well, the most current one in disaster fraud is the BP disaster fraud. We get a lot of fraud claims from that. We expect even a larger spike coming up in the next couple of months with the more of the money being released by the courts here shortly.
What is it that people need to know when it comes to disaster fraud?
What people need to know is that if you know of a neighbor or a friend or someone who you think is committing fraud against BP or any other disaster type fraud, is to contact the National Center for Disaster Fraud. It's right there. We have a great internet site. We're located right aboard LSU. We'll take all your information. You can report it anonymously, or you can give us your information that we can come back to you for, but there's no obligation once you report it to us.
What are the penalties involved if a conviction?
It depends on the crime. It could be mail fraud or wire fraud. It could be as little as just lying to a federal agent. So it depends on what the crime is, but you're looking at anywhere from probation to probably around 5 years for most of the crimes. We have gotten some penalties up toward the 10-year mark nationally.
If people have questions like more information, what should they do?
They should contact the National Center for Disaster Fraud, again at LSU, or they can contact my office at 225-389-0443.
Just how serious is the problem of fraud in Louisiana, and what does that cost the average person?
It's huge, and it cost us about $900 per family per year, auto fraud. Now, auto fraud is much bigger than auto theft. Auto fraud includes embellishing a claim and lying about losses when one is the victim of a hurricane or tornado or fire loss. Such fraud is criminal. It's very hard to pick up on, but when it is picked up, our team of the Attorney General, the State Police, and our fraud unit prosecute. We do that all the time. About 200 prosecutions last year were performed by our team, by our partnership with State Police and the Attorney General. And we tried through billboards and other public outreach to alert folks that that is wrong and, in fact, criminal, and they should not participate in that kind of activity. Unfortunately, the only bigger criminal activity in the United States is tax fraud. Folks cheating on their tax returns is the only thing bigger in dollar losses than insurance fraud, which includes, and for the most part, is made up of folks cheating on an insurance claim.
If people have questions like more information, what should they do?
Please contact us, and if you suspect fraud, you can report it anonymously through our website, www.ldi.la.gov, or call us through our 800 number, 259-5300, ldi.la.gov, or 800-259-5300.